All right, everyone. We are going to start with the first official practice. So, who was here when we did the download of the VM in Cali? Basically everyone, right? Okay. If you were not here, don't worry about it. We're gonna do a little bit of the we may go into the VM a little bit for you guys to follow along towards the end. But this is mostly more of information. And if you weren't here, I'll send out information on how to actually do it later, or somebody will. I probably will. Also, that's still there. That's cool. Can everybody see this? Is that good? This. All right, cool. So this is just an overview of what we're gonna do. So we're gonna overview what an operating system is. So who knows what an operating system is?
It's like Windows or Linux, so you use it on a computer.
Yeah. So what he said, a computer, right. This is just without any software running on it. This is just a big giant piece of metal, right, with some plastic. But an operating system actually allows it to run applications and different things like that, right? And the operating system is its own software. There is different kinds of operating systems. So right, there's Mac OS, which is on MacBooks. There's iOS, which is on your phone. There's Android, which is on other types of phones. There's Windows, which is the most common user operating system. But in fact, the most common operating system in the world is called Unix or Linux. It was made, it says, a long ass time ago, 1960s at Bell Labs. So if you're a big computer nerd, you can find this PDF in the shared Google Drive, and you can look at all this stuff, and it'll be super cool history stuff. This is what a computer used to look like as opposed to a laptop. But essentially, Linux is an operating system that is designed for programmers or for hackers, right? So we are able to use Linux to get down to a lower level than Windows allows you to, and it also has tools on it that allow you to interact with the computer easily, whereas Windows abstracts that a lot of that away from the user for sake of privacy and usability. Does that make sense? Anybody confused on that? All right. Let's see. So the next thing is, so we talked about what is Linux. The next thing is to talk about what is a distribution. So if we scroll down, technically Linux is a kind of a shared idea, right? And then there's multiple operating systems called distributions that are built on the Linux OS, right? So all of these come from some form of Linux or Unix, all of these. It's super weird. Even Mac OS technically comes from a Unix version, right? So it would be it's the base idea of how Microsoft should work, but then there's Microsoft 7, Microsoft 10, the new Microsoft 11, et cetera, going down. So a distribution is just a different version of the Linux operating system that has maybe different preloaded tools on there, a different environment to interact on. The one that we use here on the team that we had everybody download is Cali Linux. It is the pen tester distribution, right? So it has a lot of the base tools that we use for hacking, quote unquote. But actual professionals use Cali Linux to test to penetration testing, which is testing networks, computers to see if they're safe or secure, testing software, stuff like that. Anybody have any questions on that? Yeah, that all makes sense. If it does not make sense, please raise your hand. Devin, anything to add? Devin is the second instructor in case I forget anything or if anybody has extra questions. All right. So why Cali? We talked about that, right? So it is because it is the hacker's toolbox. It's easier to just have all the extra stuff that Cali comes with rather than making people download different tools when they need them. But as you get more experience, you find that Cali has a lot of stuff that you don't need. And so some people use different distributions. I'm pretty sure Devin uses the Ubuntu distribution, which some people might know from CS or Cyber. But then he downloads the extra tools that he needs. And then, so what is a GUI? So who knows what a GUI is? What's up? Yeah. Did you raise your hand? Yeah.
Graphical user interface.
Can you explain what a graphical
It's
user
like,
interface is?
It's like basically actually user friendly. Like you show.
Okay, yeah. So, right, the graphical user interface is like, think like my the calculator app or literally my sticky notes app, right? So the sticky notes app has a GUI and it allows me to do stuff into the GUI. But also, like Windows itself is a GUI. Like this interface that Windows is a graphical user interface that allows me to interact with the operating system. Whereas a command line interface is a interface where you just type in commands. We'll be using a we'll be using like a GUI version of the command line interface to interact with the computer a lot. That's what we do a lot of our work in. But like technically the command line interface, you could interact with just an operating system with just the command line interface and not anything else, just what comes up on the command line. It's a very interesting concept, and there's reasons why people make GUIs so that it's easier for like humans to actually interact with. Okay. Any questions on that? All right. So we've talked a lot about it. We've seen the different pictures and stuff. That's all useless. So if you want, right, you can come onto the training drive. Everybody should have access to it. It should be shared with everybody. And if you go to weekly training documents, you can see the like training Linux PDF, and that's the PDF that I'm going off of. And if you want to read more about like the history and like different types of GUIs and command line interfaces, you can do that. But we're just gonna skip to showing like the actual physical properties of like a command line interface and stuff like that. So before we talk about it, it's important to understand the difference between a terminal, a console, and a shell, right? So when we talk about the GUI version of the command line interface, we're talking about a terminal, right? So that is the place where we are able to input and output, like that's our input-output environment. That's where we're able to see what we put in and get back output. When we talk about the console, that's like the actual physical terminal, so like the box, the frame, the window that pops up. And then when we talk about the shell, that's the command line interpreter, right? So I can't just like type in words and the computer know what those words mean. It has to be translated to bits, et cetera, et cetera. So the shell does that interpretation for us. And that's all super boring, I know. So we're going to talk about basic commands, and we're going to talk about like what this actually all means. So if you want to follow along, open up your VMware and open up the Cali distribution for it, and we'll talk about like what this all means and kind of like what it is. So I also have like the base one that we had everybody install just for like sakes of demonstration purposes. The username for it should be Cali. The password for it should be Cali. Or not, because I can't. Oh yeah. So when you actually log in, it's basically the same as like Windows in a lot of aspects in which like you see something on the screen. This is like Cali's graphical user interface, and it allows you to actually interact with different things. As you get more experience, you learn key like shortcuts and stuff like that that help you with it better. But if you go to like the top left, you click on that, you can see terminal emulator, right? And so this is the terminal that we're talking about. And we can open it up. And then we can actually extend it if I can make it. And tell me when is a good size. Is that a good size?
Yeah.
Okay. So I'll just wait until everybody's good to get there. Anybody confused on how to get to this part?
Christian, did they specifically, let's say they have a different version of like Linux, like a different distribution, do they specifically need?
I mean, it's just called terminal emulator. Like if you have a different distro, it's just called terminal emulator. It's like the same thing that you've used. I'm assuming if you have a different distribution, you've been in a cyber or a CS class before. It's just whatever terminal emulator you use in that class.
So we're supposed to sign with Cali and Cali, or can we
Cali is it should be the default. unless.
I might.
Oh yeah, if you have your own, if you were with Hugh the other day and you guys created your own login with those ones, but if you're in here, then it should be Cali. Everybody good? Who's not good?
Do you have a machine? Okay, maybe go side by side with him because it'll take a while to install. So yeah, I'll just do side by side with him. Yeah. Yeah. Put that button right there. Yeah, they have to make. They don't have the OBM to right to make it full screen. Yeah, you need it, but yeah, it's just stuff in the home. But you can no, I click that.
Like I used to have it on it, but it didn't work.
Then I even click that.
Oh, you use root as
Well,
well.
yeah.
Okay, so I'm gonna assume everybody's good to go since there's only a couple people. Okay, so back to the PDF. We're gonna talk about like the commands that you use in the terminal, right? So just stay in the terminal. We'll talk about it later. So there's specific like actions that you want to do, right? So if we're talking about Windows, you want to open files, you want to create files, you want to create folders, you want to open folders, right? So there are actual commands to do all those things in Linux. And I know it looks confusing, but eventually it'll just be burned into your mind and it'll be like second nature, right? So if we wanted to copy a file, we use the CP command. And we'll talk about command structure and how that works. If we wanted to concatenate files together, so like you have like it actually just opens a file. It's confusing. It sounds weird. There's actual reasons behind it, but I don't really understand the reason. Do you know, Dr. Brown, like why it's called concatenate? Because I know it like puts them together, but technically it opens.
Multiple files that are going together to concatenate.
Yeah, so if you cat like multiple files at once, it'll put them together, and then you can like But it like we use cat to open a file. So say like you want to change your folder, you can use the cd command to change directory. If you want to kind of know what the type of a file is, you would use the file command. You can use find to look up commands or to look up files. So similar to like the search bar in the file explorer for Windows. You can use make dir to make a directory. So same as like new directory in the file explorer. There's a move, there's a remove or delete files, right? And then there's all these other different kinds of commands for different things you want to do, right? It's for networking stuff, for system commands, et cetera, et cetera. But we're just going to talk about like the basic file commands for now. And then we're going to do an exercise with it as well. Okay. Yeah. All right. So we're in the terminal and we want to like, say we want to know what all the files are or all the directories are in the given directory that we're at, right? So let's say I don't know what it is, but I see the command ls and it says list files, right? So the way command structures work in Linux is you just give the command that you want and then any options afterwards. But ls doesn't need any options. I mean, you can specify like a directory that you'd want to search in, and we'll talk about that later. But for now, we can just type ls and then press enter, and it'll show me everything that is in this directory that we're at, right? So we can see that the desktop folder, the documents folder, the downloads folder, music, et cetera, et cetera. Very similar to like what a Windows like basic file system looks like, right? Say I wanted to know though what's inside desktop, that's where adding arguments comes in, right? So I can say ls, but then type in desktop. And also case sensitive is super important because you can have a desktop with a capital D and a desktop with a lowercase d. But say I wanted to know what was in desktop, I say ls and then desktop and press enter, and it'll show me nothing because I don't have anything in my desktop. But it shows you what's in that subdirectory.
Also, a shortcut if you're wondering how we type that fast, yeah, then you can tab complete. So like if you type the first couple letters, you can tab.
Watch.
Or if you know that there's multiple files in the directory with like common names and you would see all of them that are on there, like let's say there's like desktop 1, desktop 2, you can tab and it'll show you everything that you can do, and then you can continue typing stuff too. Pretty life changing. I didn't know about it until like last year, so.
No, I actually just typed 500 words per minute. Any questions on this so far? Does this all make sense? Yeah. Okay, so let's do something I guess like a little bit more fun. We'll like make a file, but let's make a file in the desktop, that way we can actually LS. So if I want to go into the desktop folder, does anybody remember how to do that? CD desktop 6. Right, so change directory is what CD stands for, and then we'll say CD desktop, and we'll use the tab completes because I'm super lazy. And we'll LS, we'll see there's nothing there. Okay, does anybody remember how to, I briefly went over it, but anybody know how to make a file?
Did you say? Somebody say something.
MKDI.
Okay, so that's a directory, but close. So for a file, we want to use touch, which is weird. But we can touch.yeet, or we can say touch yeet.txt, right? We really like the word yeet here. And then I can ls, and we can see that the yeet file is there. Anybody remember the command to check what type of file this is?
I think it was file.
File. Okay, so we can file it, and then we provide it our argument. Okay, and we can see that it's yeet.txt and it's empty. So they don't really know what it is because it's an empty file and it doesn't have anything in it. Because it file like makes a guess at it. Okay. Any questions?
Who's in cyber? Who's in plebe cyber right now? Out of all the plebes, have you guys done the portion where you know like a top of the file? It's called like the magic bytes and stuff like that. So what's a file command now? It's opening the file and it's reading those first 8 bytes to see what it is.
It's a file header.
It's what?
It's a file header.
Yeah, it's reading a file header, and that's essentially telling you what it is.
We're actually gonna do, I think, so we'll do file header stuff. If not next week, the week after
There's
next.
some stuff in Bandit. It's like let's say like .txt was something else, then you can type file, and so the difference, what really sets Linux and Windows apart is the .txt, .mp4, whatever those are called file extensions. In Linux, file extensions are really only for the user. Or wait, I might getting that backwards.
Okay, so I don't want to get into the weeds of file
Sorry.
extensions and file headers because we're gonna do a digital forensics thing next week. But I could rename this whatever I want, and it could actually just be any kind of file. And the way Windows does it is they do it based off the extension, but the way Linux does it is they do it based off the file header. And we'll talk about it next week because it makes more sense. But I'm not trying to put too much knowledge in your guys' head for today. Okay. Who remembers how to remove a file or delete it?
RM file.
Okay, so what would I do to remove yeet.txt?
RM .txt.
All right. So now here's a really important lesson that's hard to learn and really sucks at times. If I were to delete a file in Windows, can I get that file back? Yes, right? Is the recycling bin. If I delete a file on the command line in Windows, that file is never coming back. Any change you make is a permanent change. I have removed whole files that I have worked on for a while before on accident, and it was very bad, and I was very sad. Do not do that. Cool? Makes sense? So this is like interacting with the actual operating system. You are telling the operating system to do things. Whereas in Windows, you have an application. You tell the application, and then the application tells the operating system, but it wraps a bunch of safety measures upon it. There are no safety measures for this. This is you and the computer, and that's it. There are certain safety measures in place, but they're super easy to get past if you own the system. And if you don't own the system, That's why you're in the club and you hack past those safety measures to not have the safety there. Okay. What's another function? Okay. So let's copy and move. Let's do that. So we'll make e.txt again. All right. So who can guess at the difference between the copy command and the move command? No one? Yeah, so like what he said, copy makes two of the file, and then move just actually moves one of the files. So let's say I wanted yeet.txt in my home folder instead. And don't worry about the folder stuff, we'll talk about that later. So I'm gonna just say move mv yeet.txt, and then I'm gonna specify the folder that I want it to go into. The super cool thing about this is I can do a ... and that means the previous folder, okay? So this is gonna move it back the previous folder. And we'll talk about how that moves in, huh?
Previous is pretty ambiguous. Like,
Okay,
that's-
sorry, the previous, well, it's not, I mean, the folder that you were just in is the previous folder. We haven't talked about the file system, that's why I'm not. We'll talk about it more later. But it moves it back a folder, right? So you see how like, you can see desktop here, like tilde/desktop. If you do the ... it's gonna move this into tilde, which is like the same as a C:/. So if I move yeet.txt ... that's my two arguments, right? So I've specified the file I want to move, and then I specified where I want it to move to. Okay? Is anybody confused on that? Okay. So if I change directories back, I should be able to see the file in there. Who can tell me how to change directories to the folder that we just moved the file to? I mean, yeah, that works. I was just going to cd ... but also cd tilde works because that is the name of the folder that this is in. And then how can I see where yeet.txt is? ls? Okay, cool. And we see that yeet.txt is here. Cool. Now say I want yeet.txt to be both in my home folder and in my desktop. How am I going to do that? I'm deaf, so people have to speak up. Copy. Okay, so how would I do that? Okay, and then so we want to specify the place that it goes, right? So just like in the move command, we specify the file that we want to like adjust, and then where we want that file to go to. So we're going to copy yeet.txt, and we're going to copy it into desktop. Right, so if we do that, and then we change our directory to desktop, and we actually run the right commands, we have yeet.txt in there as well. Anybody confused about any of those steps? No? If you are confused, please tell me. It's perfectly fine to be confused. I was confused the first lecture, and then I didn't raise my hand, and then I got really confused later too.
So we're pretty much just moving it around right now.
Yeah, we're just moving it around. And so this is like, I know it seems like very like menial, but this is like the key parts of like actually being just able to move around the terminal and getting familiar with it, because like later on you're gonna be like editing like files in the terminal and then moving those files around, like looking at the insides of files, looking at the types of files. It'll make more sense in the forensics portion, but like being able to move around the terminal and the file system is like very key to what we do. I basically only use the terminal when I'm using like my regular system. Everybody's good? I know it's super dry and boring. Okay. So yeet.txt has nothing in it right now, but we can put stuff into it. So we can put stuff into it by doing the echo command. So echo, and then a quotation mark, and then we could like type stuff in here, and it's just gonna spit back out what we want. Okay. So I can say like echo, I am really bored. Please shut up. Right? Which is what you're all thinking. And it'll echo it back out onto the terminal. But we can move this into a file also. Okay. And it's by doing a redirection. And don't worry too much about like the redirection right now. We'll talk about it more on Thursday and like the more like advanced Linux stuff. But right now we're just talking about basic stuff. So we're gonna say echo, and then this is a redirection, right? So it's like the greater than sign, which is saying like take what's on this side and put it over here. Okay. So we're gonna echo these words into our file yeet.txt. Okay. And then if we ls yeet.txt is still there, how can we see the contents of the file? Cat. So okay, well I'm not gonna type it. Who can tell me how to type it? Huh? Shut up. No. CAT. And then we can see once we cat it, it says I'm really bored. Please shut up. Today. Cool.
What this decode thing that keeps popping up on mine?
Could you probably you have to end it with a close. So you can input with that. I'm just gonna show everybody what just happened on his. So he typed like this, and this is like I've done this before. I do it all the time. Like he typed like this, and then pressed enter, and then it says dequote. It's because he did not finish out the end of the quotation mark. Does that make sense? Cool. So if we need to like finish out the end of the quotation, and you can just do it on that line and press enter, and then it'll still do what you want. So that's important, like specifying files and like what you want to type and stuff. Okay. We're gonna like try to do an activity now, and I hope it's not too advanced. But I think it's fun. It's also really nerdy. You'll see. Okay, so everybody should be able to have like a web browser thing on here. If you like web browser and then log into your stuff, I'll give everybody like 5 minutes to do this. If you log into your stuff and you go to shared drives. Whoa, what the fuck?
That's sick. I love this exercise.
Shared drive.
Dude, what the
I
hell?
just said, oh, I think
I don't know what's going on. Okay. Anyways, if you go to share drives, you should have a cybersecurity on there. If you click on that, to load. This gives times to log in username account and stuff on here.
Oh, are you on which internet? You know what? So also, this is another issue. Do not expect to go back to your rooms and log on to Cali and then be able to plug in via Ethernet and be able to surf the web. Like,
Yeah,
if
you
that's
can.
an issue, ITSD blocks Kali Linux because they think that we're all super elite hackers or something.
Block web queries.
I'm pretty sure
They just block searching Cali Linux.
No, I'm pretty sure they just can't even access.
Strange.
I could be completely wrong.
I've been able to search on Cali off of my thing.
Yeah.
Sir,
Sir, do you want to learn about Linux basics?
would you like to learn about Linux fundamentals, sir? Okay, for everybody that doesn't know reps, Lieutenant Commander Slack. He's an engineer. If you're interested in that, please harass him. He's always available, never not busy.
Never not.
That's the point. Alright. Where did I put this?
Shared drive.
Oh, yes.
So once you get into the cybersecurity team training, shared drive, go into VM sub,
Yeah.
and you're gonna double click on the file that says install bash crawl, and then you're gonna say download anyway virus.
This kid automatically switched me out of one.
Well, I can't do anything without the
Okay, who has problems? I mean, besides Devin.